Sid Meier's civilization has always had a major and thriving multiplayer base. Anyone from small gangs of friends logging on for 90 shenanigans to whole Discord communities coming together for their love or their addiction of Civ. This includes my own Discord community who regularly hosts multiplayer game sessions, everything from casual sim and preserve spamming games to silly all Babylon craziness to fully modded competitive games complete with drafts and large wars between players all scratching for a place at the top. Needless to say, when Fraxis mentioned multiplayer as part of the review embargo process, including hosting multiplayer sessions for us creators to play together way back in January, I was immediately interested. Fraxis was putting emphasis on the multiplayer experience, and I really wanted to see what they had for us. With all embargoes finally lifted and the game finally fully launching because this video took way too long to get out, I can now discuss in detail how I felt regarding the experiences. This includes two very different games of multiplayer that I've played so far, one that was played in secret with developers and content creators, and another one that I live streamed here recently on the channel. So let me give you my first impressions of how I think things change the moment you load into a multiplayer lobby, and what I think about the limitations, but also the potential for Civ 7 multiplayer. Before I go any further, I do want to establish a little bit of expectations based on what you are looking for in terms of multiplayer experience. To do so, I want to establish three different types of players. The first being the casual multiplayer friend group. This is the group of friends that just jump into a game together having little to no idea what's going on, but just want to enjoy the experiences, the highs and the lows of the game together. Some will be sitting on one city and wonder swimming, others beelining their size number to rush as fast as possible towards nukes, and the one guy that never stops talking about the Roman Empire. Most of these players will have less than 100 hours into the game, and are also probably surprised that 100 hours is the first cutoff for a threshold here. But these players have the lowest expectations of what should be provided in a multiplayer lobby, but look forward to just experiencing something new together. The second group I'd call the strategy enthusiast, or power gamers. These players often have put hundreds of hours into previous Civ titles, having a very special place in their heart for that one more turn itch. These players thrive on breaking the game in single player and love beating up on the AI, but decided to stretch their legs with some of their friends. They mostly want to maximize their builds and show off to the lobby, but aren't looking to mod or change the actual core gameplay in any way. Because of this, they have relatively stronger expectations for how a game should function and what to expect from Fraxis. Lastly, the third group I want to address are the competitive league-based players. These players want the game to be incredibly balanced, where their players' skills and decision-making shines, removing RNG factors or the most overpowered builds entirely from the game, requiring entire balanced mods to rework and having more of an esports style experience. This includes defining specific rule sets for almost anything about the game, including ban and draft phases, banning exploits, ranked player elo systems, no quick game rules, and more. These players will have the highest expectation for what a multiplayer game experience should be like and are willing to put in the work on their end, whether it's community management, modding, and much more. All three types of these players are important and should be considered when making a multiplayer experience for a game company. I've been all three different types in my personal game history, and they even swing back and forth depending on the night. I want you to try to identify which of the three general player types that you identify with most, and leave your feedback understanding your expectations versus someone else's, while I try to address all of you in each of the main areas of discussion. With all that out of the way, let's talk about the experience. My very first game of multiplayer, I wasn't actually allowed to record because it was a 2K hosted online event designed simply to walk us through the multiplayer experience, answer some of our questions, help us with some of our final review videos, and actually allow us to talk with some authority on what Civ multiplayer is like when the time came. Got to play alongside the wonderful Van Bradley, as well as one of our 2K contacts and another Fraxis developer, bringing us to a nice 4-player game. So we jumped into a lobby, loaded up a small map, talked about whether or not we would use mementos, which I promptly said, let's not, and we loaded into a game. Ever since turn 1, the race was on. Everyone built the new and super fun scouts and used their search abilities to quickly beeline as many goodie hats as possible, being sure to snatch them up before any other player could. I played as Rome, naturally, and got a very fast beginning of an empire down. I found the natural wonder, the Uluru, in a workable desert right next to me, and immediately got excited to settle nearby, just to find that my neighbor, Egypt, settling on the other side of the wonder and culture bombed it before I could. This of course set up an immediate tension, which was very unique while playing against a player compared to an AI. I already had a very fast army and was wreaking havoc on the nearby independent power. Now I didn't have any real plans on warring my neighbor, but just having the option on the table was enough to bring quite an air of excitement to the game. A what's gonna happen feeling, a will he, won't he tension that is super unique to multiplayer. But that's when the independent power that I was fighting was actually suzerained by Egypt as well, converting them into a city and even forcing peace between me and their units. Now I'm not gonna lie, the mechanic is kind of frustrating in a multiplayer setting. I was about to kill this in infinite power, potentially get a boost to 100 production to a wonder I was building in the capital, and now all of a sudden I was at peace. It was a city, and I would have had to declare war on its suzerain in order to take it out. But I guess that's appropriate given the protection a suzerain promises its city-state. But you know what I did? I declared war on him right then and there, marched in and killed that city-state to the cries of my neighbor. Seeing how fast the city fell, he immediately started building defensive units, and a cold front established between us along that Alluru border. Now eventually we did decide we didn't really want to attack each other, and we were able to negotiate a peace deal, allowing us to turn our attention back home and live cooperatively together. Of course, he did break that deal and declared war on me in the last 5 minutes of the night, causing me to panic and switch all of my production back to walls and units. But he also mostly did that just to troll me, and he didn't even invade. Even though it was the first night I had met these guys, it was fun, silly stuff like this that just made the night feel like a bunch of friends chilling out and playing a super casual game of Civ together. And you want to know how many desyncs that we had? 0. It was incredibly stable and the game ran super smooth. I know it was only a 4-player lobby, but that was the experience that we had. We had to end the game for a time before the era transition, but overall, it was a very casual and fun night. Now I want to preface that not everyone has super stable games of Civ 7, as evidence from some other content creators that I know, including myself in the next game. But I want to be very clear, the desyncs in this game were our fault, not the game's. And I want to make sure that it is clear to those that saw in the live stream and didn't actually see us fix the problem. The game above is actually a game between myself, Raising Zozo and Nystagmus from the Civ Show, and Civ6 multiplayer extraordinaire, Malm. Each of us had early access to the game, so we were able to play this game on February 5th, one day before the full early access was released. Unfortunately, one of us did have the beta build still installed on our machine instead of switching over to the day 0 patch. Obviously, if you have literally 2 different builds of the Civilization game in a multiplayer lobby, you're going to have a lot of desyncs. So when our very first turn rolled over and then we had a desync, we were very, very scared. Surprisingly, the game actually ran, and each of the desyncs was actually very quick to load back in. Once we figured out what the issue was though, and we made sure that we were all on the exact same build, we had a much more stable game. I think we made it about 70 turns before we had any issues whatsoever. But when that desync did happen, it immediately fixed itself. The game reloaded and we didn't have the desync happen again. In Civ 6, as soon as you have your first desync, you generally have desyncs every other turn. That wasn't the case for us. The game seemed to have just fixed itself. It might have had a momentary hiccup between our internet connections, but overall, the game itself was actually very smooth. Now, is 2 games enough to actually decide whether or not Firaxis has fixed the netcode and stability is now a thing in Civ games and you shouldn't have to worry about desyncs whatsoever? Of course not. You need a lot more data to actually tell that. However, in a first impression sense, stability seems kind of promising. This was only 4 players playing, but remember we had 1 player in Vancouver, 1 in Toronto, 1 in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, and 1 all the way over in France. You'll see in the footage above what the resyncing actually looks like because we did have Nystagmus crash very early on in the game. However, he was able to just rejoin using the join code mid-turn while we were still playing. We resynced together and all of a sudden everything was back and smooth again. So even though we literally had a player drop and resync right back into the same game, we had like 1 desync, which is great. Is stability absolutely fixed in Civ 7? I can't say that. And the longer that I work on this video, the more instances that I see from other creators that are having some classic Civ stability issues. But it feels like it's better than it was in Civ 5 and Civ 6. The one crazy thing I do want to note before I forgot though, there's no pause button. I don't know why Firaxis didn't add a pause button to a multiplayer game. I mean, I guess it is the meme of, Mom, no, I can't pause a multiplayer game in Call of Duty. But that's not how multiplayer games are ran in Civ. It's not a matchmaking random player type of setup. Most games of Civilization are played in Discords with friends or community members. Not to mention, Civ can be hours long. To expect us to not have any bathroom breaks or to just not even be able to turn off the dynamic timer mid-game is kind of insane. As long as Firaxis does this one thing, adds the pause button back or adds the ability to turn off the dynamic timer partway through the game so you could effectively pause the game but still allow players to make some moves, then I would say you satisfy all the requirements that are needed for our first multiplayer friend group, the casual friend group, the ones that just want to jump into a sandbox, have some fun, have a stable game, be able to pause when they need to pause, and enjoy the evening. Now, for the power gamers and Civ fanatics that want to dive into the meat and bones here and know what some of the new Civ 7 mechanics feel like when adapted into a multiplayer setting, let me talk more about our game shown here. I'm playing as Himiko leading the Kamai Empire. Right away, you can see that our scouts have done a ton of work revealing the nearby lands. I have a ton of minor rivers nearby which work with the Kamai's abilities, synergizing with these minor rivers. This is a testament to the new way spawn biases work. In Civ 6, the map was generated first, and the computer would then try to replace each of the civs according to their biases. But this would often place players too close together, or sometimes would fail and get you to get a spawn that would be nothing like your bias. Also, someone was always destined to get that crappy tundra or desert spawn. But Civ 7 uses a different approach. The computer will replace the players equally spread on a blank canvas, and then the map is generated around them, specifically generating the terrain to match their spawn biases. That's why you see the map generated so many rivers for me. This new process, plus the fact that the yields tend to be good on any tile from tundra to tropical, means that your entire multiplayer lobby is much more guaranteed to get the spawn that they want to have a fun and interesting game. Malm playing Persia below me got a wonderful spawn, not with one, but two different natural wonders. The race towards these natural wonders is quite refreshing in Civ 7, given just how good the wonder bonuses can be now. But I'm not complaining. I have a very good land, good resources, and this massive mountain range to my south, cutting me off mostly from Malm and Zozo, but leaving nothing but open plains between me and Nystagmus, who's playing Rome. So my early game became all about trying to figure out if Nystagmus wanted to fight me or befriend me. Either way, I again got out a very fast army and started fighting some nearby independent powers. In single player, this usually goes off without a hitch because the AI tends to ignore the independent powers for most of the early game. They spend all of their influence sending endeavors, using up their influence, allowing you to simply accept some free yields without support and sweep up the city-states for yourself. This is not the same in multiplayer. This became incredibly important because if you win a city-state race, you keep that city-state for the entire era. There's definitely some potential there if you and a friend both send friendship to the same independent power at the same time, and then you spend more influence to try to win the race, and then he tries to spend influence to win the race as well. But once the race is won, the race is over. There is no way to wrestle through friendship away from another player. It is honestly a welcome change. I hated it in multiplayer when the same person kept dumping envoys into your city-state that is clearly yours, and you both end up just sending 90 envoys into this single city-state, ruining each other's game. Now it's all about spending influence on the independent power before they become a city-state, or killing them before they become a city-state. So I was able to befriend the independent power Moche to the north here very quickly, and then use my army to kill Megadito, who Raising Zozo was trying to befriend. I was then also able to use my influence to befriend a different independent power far off to the west that Raising Zozo had not actually found yet. The layers that are involved in which independent powers to befriend, which ones to fight, can be quite complicated and actually quite fun in the early game. Fighting these independent powers also gave me my first levels on my great commanders, which were very useful in a war coming up. Of course, there's the classic wonder races that are always apparent in every single Civ game, and I was even able to snag the Hanging Gardens early on to Malm's detriment. You'll notice pretty quickly that there's gonna be some pretty broken combinations you can find in Civ 7, especially with the ability to decouple leaders from their civilizations. Most notably are things like Charlemagne, who gets free cavalry unit and he gets a celebration. If you combine that with the Indian Marian civilization, who has a unique cavalry unit as well as huge happiness bonuses, you're gonna get a pretty busted Civ. You'll see this lobby doesn't have any crazy combinations like that. It is only the actual game's historical picks. Of course, I say that with very big quotation marks because the Filipino leader leading the Mayans and Himiko leading the Kamai is quite a stretch. But with this starting rosters DLC, this is what the game recommends. Depending on how serious your friend group is when you're playing video games, you can always set your own house rules whether or not you allow leaders to only lead their historical choice, or if you want to leave it completely open-ended, just like you can have mementos be optional. Mementos are absolutely busted in the game. Some of them aren't that strong, but some of them are absolutely crazy. Anything from free attribute points to having scouts get +3 vision on all of their search and lookout abilities is Like, so silly. But obviously, as an optional game mode, it is completely down to personal preference. No matter what you do, there will be plenty of broken combinations to find, especially when you start having games like this one, where Nystagmus and I very quickly found out that we had a lot more to gain by working together than being opponents. Himiko can not only accept, but even support endeavors for free at zero cost to her influence. Machiavelli has more influence per turn than any other leader. This allows him to send me more endeavors than anyone else can, and I can support all of them, boosting both of our stats. But also, every time I do support one of these, he actually gets a flat gold bonus. I can then use the influence that I didn't spend to send him more endeavors. The two of us working together very quickly got both of our stats to skyrocket past both Raising Zozo and Malm, who's literally a league player, and the other two players did definitely notice. Raising Zozo did a lot of things to antagonize the two of us, including actually adding sanctions to me. The sanction mechanics is absolutely so much fun. It is the biggest FU specifically in a Civ game. Raising Zozo would be like, I sanction you, and I'm going to hinder your public morale. And then I have to decide to either block it, spending my influence, or saying, okay. And then once he sanctions me, then I send retaliatory sanctions back onto him, and then our relationship just spirals down the toilet. It was so funny. Especially for any of those role players that are watching this video, you're gonna love this. There's so many new mechanics to play around with in a multiplayer setting. The best part was using a brand new feature to Civ 7. Zozo had a few scouts that were standing on my borders, and as the Mayans, their scouts actually count as military units. Because he had military units standing on my borders, I was able to do the denounce military presence, which asks a player to remove their military units from their border. Otherwise, you declare war. Zozo said, okay, and ended up declaring war on me. To my surprise. Nystagmus was my ally, so he got pulled into the war, and we both packed up our armies. Using the brand new army commanders, shuffled through a mountain choke point and invaded his land. This also brings up how fun war is now in Civ 7, not just because of the army commanders, but because every single Civ has unique units for half or almost the entire era. No longer is there going to be one Civ that has a unique unit and a higher advantage at this point in time, and another Civ that's unique unit just went obsolete. Now it's gonna be legions and war elephants versus Hulche and immortals, all led by an army commander that now has the promotions, allowing you to just throw your military units as a meat grinder into the war fronts, smashing them like pawns against their walls, because it doesn't matter if they die, or matter as much given they don't have the promotions themselves. But targeting the army commander, now that's satisfying. The new war support system now allows you to use influence to add war support to your side of the war, not only adding combat strength to you, but also war wariness and happiness penalties to your enemy. This happiness penalty was making things really hard for Zozo back at home, but also decreased his ability to produce more Hulche. But not only can you add war support to your war, you can add war support to your friend's war. So Nystagmus was spending his extra influence as Machiavelli, adding combat strength to my war elephants. Zozo then was spamming all these Hulche, trying to take out our elephants and our legions together. But with this war support system, I decided that I was eventually gonna try to poke the bear Malm, playing as Persia. Now, I tend to be the type of player that likes giving another player a heads up if I'm gonna war them, but Civ 7 now makes it actually beneficial to do so. Surprise wars against your friends gives them a huge amount of influence as well as combat strength on you and war wariness back home. That means you want to do a formal war, but to do so, you actually have to have a negative relationship, not just denounce them. That means more sanctions. But as soon as I denounced them and I was decreasing our relationship towards hostile so that I can get a formal war on him, he was like, oh, okay, and then started building immortals and getting his war support ready. To no one's surprise, he ended up being the one declaring war on me when my army was actually now cut off from my original cities. The double pincer attack from Zozo and Mom sandwiching mine and Nystagmus's armies on the city that Nystagmus had captured was super well fought and so much fun, but Mom also decided not to attack one, but two of my cities. Without being able to get fast reinforcements to my units, the double pincer attack ended up decimating our armies, and I just barely got my army commander out of there from reinforcements with my war elephants. At that point, I ended up plugging choke points with elephants, just trying to hold the mountain pass, hold the door, and keeping Mom's immortals out. Of course, then he kept attacking on the coastline, so I had to build walls and a bunch of galleys using a navigable river to defend it. Meanwhile, Zozo was using his special scout unit, which in the middle of the era unlocked a stealth ability, and he was a stealth pillaging all of the tiles in my capital the entire war. Even after I realized what was happening, my archer couldn't freaking find this guy. And then on our western front, I was able to hold the mountain pass until the literal plague hit, making so that none of my units could heal outside of my territory, which means I couldn't fortify and stay in a defensive position, but actually had to take the fight to him. But this aggressiveness was actually able to get me a kill on his commander, severely hurting his western push. But of course, that wasn't his real focus, because on our western front, he pulled out the triple ballista setup, which siege units damage every single unit inside of a city at the same time, meaning his ballista attacking my city not only killed the city walls, but the archer, the commander, and the boat inside at the same time, and he was able to swing in and snag the city. Mom having taken one city and about to break through the mountain choke point, I was then finally able to negotiate a peace deal just moments before he broke through or realized that he was about to break through. Needless to say, there was a bunch of crazy stuff happening in this war. It was a ton of fun. Everyone seemed to be having a good time. And it was honestly just a wonderful, wonderful day. Now, this can definitely get you into irrel situations, just like in any Civ, where you are both spamming units, trying to fight a war, and no longer focusing on your sim potential or your legacy paths. This is obviously a very big problem in Civ 6 free-for-all formats, where the moment someone declares war on you in a classical era, both you and that player are just out of the game, because those that are peacefully simming are always going to outscale even the person that warred, even if that war goes well for them. However, the new age transition and the forced peace at the end of an era does present a possibility that wars will not go on forever, and with the rubber banding that happens twice throughout the game, where all techs and civics are equalized, you won't have the problem nearly as badly, where if someone goes to war early, that means you and the person that warred you are just kind of out of the game forever in a free-for-all setup. I do want to calm some fears about the rubber banding though, because I've been hearing a lot of people saying, well, then why would you do anything to try to get ahead? Because if everyone's gonna be back in the same position, and simply, you're not in the same position. Mom took my city. He now in the next era has that settlement, as well as the infrastructure, as well as the massive and beautiful empire that he built. Yes, all the buildings in it, he's going to have to overbuild and replace with new types of buildings. Yes, he's going to have to bring some of his cities back online, but he also had a bunch of Golden Age legacies, so he can bring a lot of things from the previous era into this era. Like, getting ahead is very important before the age transition, but you won't be nearly as behind after the transition if something did go wrong for you. I've yet to play a full game with multiple eras, but we did at least stick around to see what happens in the age transition. For those that are wondering, you literally go back to the lobby to pick your new civs. It is completely up to you and your actual lobby at home to make the rules as to who gets to draft first based off of anything you want, whether who had the most legacy points or who just deserves that civ, or you can play as duplicate civilizations. You can do whatever you want in the lobby. It's literally like, as long as you have unlocked those civilizations through the course of your game from your leader pick, your civ pick, or your actions in game, you can then pick that leader in the next era. This does also allow duplicate civilizations, for those that are wondering. That was actually a very important question, and I got the answer here. How much multiplayer feels when it comes to a full campaign versus just a single era is a little bit out of scope for this video. This, of course, is a first impression type of multiplayer video, but hopefully my games have given you a little bit of an impression of what Civ 7 multiplayer is like. For the casual multiplayer friend group, those that just want to jump into a game and see what happens, I think you're going to enjoy Civ 7. You will, of course, have to disable any type of turn timer if you and your friends are going to have any type of casual play. That is until Firaxis please add the pause button. And of course, there's also a 5-player maximum that is allowed in a antiquity or exploration era games. There is 8 players allowed if you just play modern. So if you have a very big friend group, you might have to break into 2 groups or all jump into one big modern era game. This is on their 2025 roadmap in order to expand, allowing for 8 players to play a full campaign game through all 3 eras, as well as adding optional team-based games. They haven't announced a date for these updates, but given that it's on their high priority list, I would expect it sometime this year. To the power gamers that want to really try to step it up in a multiplayer game, there is a ton of different avenues to do so. You can, of course, all set your own house rules for what you want to allow. For instance, the optional mementos or the optional historical versus mix and match leaders to their civilizations, and you can get as involved as you want. I do want to note that there's a lot left to be desired when it comes to the UI, as well as information and things like the Civilopedia. So things will be confusing for a while, but hopefully with some experience or watching some good YouTube videos, subscribe, you'll have a fun time with the learning process. Firaxis has also noted that they are trying to do a lot of UI adjustments coming up. So hopefully there's more information for those power games available soon. And lastly, to those league-based players, I, of course, am not a member of the Civ Players League or another type of league like that, but I do have a lot of friends that are involved. I think Civ 7 is worth giving a try. There's a lot of core gameplay stuff that is very fun there. There's a lot of stuff that is absolutely broken, and I think you will have to be the ones that are the most strict in terms of the rules that you employ, especially when it comes to the different mix and match abilities or mementos. You'll have to do bans and drafts, or you can say it's Civ 7, this is completely busted. Until you get mod access, it is what it is. But I do want to say, obviously, to Firaxis that mod support is incredibly important to these types of leagues. Of course, in the first couple of months of the game being released, I would encourage anyone to play the game as it's designed, given how the game is designed for fun, and some players want a game that's designed for competitiveness. The sooner we get mod access available, the better, especially because we've heard repeatedly that Ed and other members of Firaxis know that the competitive multiplayer community are very good and very eager and ready to mod the game, and that Firaxis relies on the competitive leagues to have the ability to mod the game however they see fit. So hopefully we get that as soon as possible. Some of the final things that Firaxis has already mentioned that they're trying to add include more map types, games that are played from single or only 2 eras, as well as hot seat multiplayer, which of course is something that needs to be addressed. These are all things that I really wish were just available at launch, especially when it comes to just the general UI and Civilopedia feeling far from finished. But overall, I think Civ 7 is going to be a lot of fun. Civ 7 multiplayer is very exciting. I am very happy with my first impressions of the game so far. But like with most of the Civ 7 reviews you've been hearing, the game feels like it's got some really good bones. It just is lacking on a lot of the skin. the polish, the looks, and the information that's available. I'd encourage players that are interested in being part of the Civilization journey as the game grows, as we as a community grow and watch the game and play the game together. If you feel like you want to try out Civ and you want to try out Civ in multiplayer, go for it. Also, join our Discord. We're organizing multiplayer games. We're going to have Civ channels where you can ask questions and learn about the game specifically. But also, if you feel like it's just not for you just yet, not until at least mod support comes in or better UI adjustments are made or a sale comes in, that's of course very valid too. I hope to do another video here about multiplayer game setup, but also I've been getting in comments about my official review video. I'm not going to make a fully detailed official review video. I pretty much fully subscribe to pretty much everything that was in Bostius and Van Bradley's review videos. But if you want to know some of my detailed opinions, come down to the Twitch channel. I'll be live streaming there every Tuesday and Thursdays at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or ask in the comments down below. I know there's a lot that I've glossed over in this video. I kind of just needed the video out at this point. So thank you for hanging out all the way to this point. Leave any last comments you got down in the comment section, and I'll see you guys next time. Later, nerds.